December 16, 1944. Dawn over the sleepy town of Monschau, Germany. The frozen ground quivered as another wave of American artillery howled across the treetops. But something was wrong this time. The explosions didn't rip into the soil. They bloomed in the air, hanging for a split second like fireballs before raining steel down on German infantry columns advancing through the misty Ardennes. Veterans of the Eastern Front, men who had survived Stalingrad and Kursk, froze in disbelief. No foxhole, no trench, no tree root could shield them now. Among the 326th Volksgrenadier Division, panic began replacing discipline. These were not the patterns of impact they had trained to evade. Airbursts detonating at the perfect height, as if guided, shredded entire platoons before they crawled 2 steps toward cover. It was here that Colonel Oscar Alfred Axelson of the U.S. 406th Artillery Group made a choice that defied orders but would alter the fate of the battlefield. Axelson, aware that the lightly equipped 38th Cavalry Squadron was moments away from being crushed under the German offensive, authorized the deployment of an ultra-secret weapon, proximity fuses. The decision was forbidden. These devices were classified above top secret, reserved only for anti-aircraft use. But without them, Monschau would fall within the hour. Axelson gambled his career, and possibly his freedom, to save the line. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The new fuses sensed their distance from the ground and exploded at lethal elevation. Fragments blanketed wide areas with deadly precision, multiplying the killing power of artillery many times over. German officers attempting to find patterns or weaknesses found none. Every burst seemed perfectly timed, perfectly placed. The forest canopy, once their shield, now became a source of splintering death. What German infantry didn't know was chilling. Inside those shells were miniature radar systems, tiny vacuum tube transmitters tough enough to survive the brutal force of a gun barrel's blast. The U.S. had just unleashed a weapon years ahead of its time. And Monschau was merely the beginning. But if Monschau was the spark, the next engagements would reveal just how unstoppable this new technology truly was, and how it would reshape the Battle of the Bulge in a matter of days. The moment Axelson broke radio silence to report his decision, a wave of alarm rippled up the American chain of command. The proximity fuse was considered the Allies' most sensitive battlefield secret, second only to the atomic project. If even one intact fuse fell into German hands, their scientists could unravel its design, jeopardizing every front. But the German attack at Monschau had stalled, and the results were undeniable. Axelson's gamble had stopped a full German regiment in its tracks. News traveled fast. By December 19th, Eisenhower himself demanded confirmation. The front was collapsing in multiple sectors. German armor was punching its way toward the Meuse. So, with no alternatives left, SHAEF issued a historic directive. Proximity fused shells were cleared for ground combat across the entire Ardennes. In one stroke, the most classified artillery technology ever built was unleashed into the largest battle America would fight in World War II. American logistics responded with lightning speed. Within hours, trucks carrying crates marked only with coded serial numbers rolled toward Bastogne, St. Vith, and Elsenborn Ridge. The 463rd Parachute Field Artillery Battalion received their first shipment just as the German ring tightened around Bastogne. Their 75mm pack howitzers, light, mobile, perfect for airborne units, began firing proximity fuses into the surrounding woods. To the Germans, the effect was horrifying. Tree bursts now detonated automatically at the perfect height. A single shell could clear an entire section of forest. The 969th Field Artillery Battalion, an African-American unit, used 155mm guns that blasted shells high above treelines, turning them into storms of steel and wood fragments. German prisoners later said these barrages felt inhuman, as if the shells were choosing their targets. Meanwhile, German intelligence was in chaos. They captured thousands of proximity fuse shells in a supply depot and completely misinterpreted them. The presence of vacuum tubes made no sense. How could delicate electronics survive the shock of firing? German engineers concluded it must be a trick or decoy. They had no idea they were staring at the future of warfare. In Bastogne, proximity fuses proved their worth immediately. Whenever German infantry massed for an assault, airbursts shredded them before they crossed open ground. The defenders were cold, exhausted, and surrounded, but their artillery now punched far above its weight. But the true test of this new technology, the moment that would shock even seasoned commanders, was about to erupt along the Sauer River on Christmas night. Christmas night, 1944. The Ardennes lay buried under a thick, icy fog. Along the Sauer River near Echternach, a German battalion crept toward the crossing, believing the weather made them invisible. No aircraft could fly. No forward observers could see through the blackness. Under normal conditions, this would have been the perfect moment to slip across the river and outflank American positions. Instead, they were walking into one of the most lethal artillery ambushes of World War II. American observers couldn't see the Germans, but they didn't need to. Proximity fuses did the seeing for them. When the first shells streaked across the sky, the German column barely reacted. They expected ground impacts, but then the air above them flashed white, and fragments screamed down like razor-edged hail. Men were cut down instantly, unable to advance or retreat, pinned between river ice and the unstoppable storm overhead. General George S. Patton, racing north to break the siege of Bastogne, personally witnessed the aftermath. In his memoir War as I Knew It, he recorded the chilling number: 702 German dead, counted by hand after the barrage lifted. It was one of the only instances in the entire war where proximity fuse casualties could be measured with near precision. A single battalion had been erased in minutes. Word spread quickly through German ranks. Soldiers refused to make river crossings after the Christmas massacre. Units that once prided themselves on discipline now splintered into panicked groups, some abandoning positions when they heard the telltale whistle of incoming shells. Proximity fuses had done more than kill, they shattered morale. The battlefield had turned into a place where the very air seemed weaponized. Forested terrain, once Germany's strongest defensive ally, now betrayed them. Airbursts snapped branches like whiplashes, transforming wood into spears. Entire clearings were wiped clean by a single shell detonating at canopy height. No digging, no camouflage, no foxhole offered protection. The Ardennes, a natural fortress, had become a killing field suspended in midair. American artillery crews adapted instantly. They no longer needed perfect coordinates, just approximate range. The fuse handled the rest. Veteran gunners marveled at the almost supernatural precision. Shells bursting at the ideal height every time, regardless of terrain or weather. The old equation of artillery fire had changed forever. But the Ardennes still hid one more battlefield transformation, a showdown on Elsenborn Ridge where proximity fuses would break the elite of the Waffen-SS in a way no one believed possible. If the Sauer River revealed the brutality of proximity fuses, Elsenborn Ridge would expose their strategic power. From December 17th to 19th, the 2nd and 99th Infantry Divisions held the high ground against Hitler's most formidable assault force, the 6th SS Panzer Army, including the notorious 1st SS Panzer Division Leibstandard Adolf Hitler. The Germans expected to smash through in hours. Instead, they ran headfirst into a wall of American artillery unlike anything ever recorded. The ridge offered a perfect battlefield laboratory for proximity fuses. The terrain forced German troops into predictable avenues of attack. Each time they massed for an assault, American artillery unleashed timed airbursts that detonated above the slopes, shredding entire companies before they crested the ridge. Veterans of the Eastern Front who had survived countless barrages found themselves blindsided by explosions in the sky, not on the ground. In just 72 hours, American units fired over 160,000 rounds, including around 40,000 proximity-fused shells. Despite making up only a quarter of the ammunition used, these airburst rounds accounted for an estimated 60% of German casualties. Bodies were so densely packed on certain slopes that subsequent assault waves stumbled over their fallen comrades. Survivors described the ridge as a white hell filled with invisible weapons. For the Waffen-SS, this was a psychological collapse unlike any they had ever experienced. Elite troops, raised on the belief of their own superiority, found themselves powerless. Airbursts detonated precisely above every attempt at concealment. Trees, rocks, trenches, nothing mattered. Some SS soldiers reportedly abandoned their formations and charged toward American lines in desperation, preferring small arms fire to the terror from above. Behind the scenes, American artillery commanders were pioneering revolutionary tactics made possible by proximity fuses. Time on target barrages, multiple batteries firing so that shells arrived simultaneously, became devastating when paired with fuses that knew the exact moment to detonate. Dozens of overhead bursts striking at once created destruction so sudden that German radios often couldn't transmit a warning before frontline units were annihilated. By the morning of December 20th, the German offensive at Elsenborn had collapsed. The ridge never fell. The SS never broke through. The failure of their most elite divisions marked a turning point in the Battle of the Bulge and solidified proximity fuses as one of the decisive technologies of the war. But the skies themselves were about to become a battlefield, and proximity fuses would soon prove deadly not just to ground troops, but to the Luftwaffe during one of its last desperate gambles. With the German offensive faltering on the ground, Hitler made one last desperate gamble in the skies. On January 1, 1945, the Luftwaffe launched Operation Bodenplatte, a massive airstrike meant to cripple Allied airfields across Western Europe. Nearly 900 German fighters roared across the dawn horizon, low and fast, hoping to catch American aircraft on the ground. And while the surprise worked initially, the return flight would become a slaughter, because waiting for them was a wall of proximity-fused anti-aircraft fire. Traditional flak required predicting where an aircraft would be. Proximity fuses required no such guesswork. As German pilots climbed to escape Allied territory, shells erupted at precisely the right altitude, each burst throwing a lethal sphere of shrapnel into the sky. In a matter of minutes, the Luftwaffe lost 172 aircraft to anti-aircraft guns alone, losses it could never replace. Operation Bodenplatte, meant to revive German air power, instead accelerated its collapse. By early January, the secrecy of the proximity fuse was impossible to maintain. Too many shells had been fired. Too many soldiers had seen the eerie precision of the airbursts. The War Department authorized a controlled press release describing a new type of artillery improvement, without revealing its radar heart. Meanwhile, German intelligence analysts finally realized what they were facing, but far too late to matter. Post-war interrogations revealed German commanders were stunned by the weapon's impact. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt admitted bluntly, "The American artillery, especially the airburst shells, destroyed our attacks before they began." General Otto von Manschufel added that even hardened veterans panicked under the strange new barrages. The numbers supported their testimony. Proximity-fused rounds, just 200,000 of them, accounted for 15,000 to 20,000 German casualties during the Bulge. Yet behind this devastation were American workers, many of them women, assembling delicate vacuum tubes and circuitry without knowing what they were building. In secret factories across the U.S., they produced one fuse every 2 seconds by late 1944. Their precision laid the foundation for post-war electronics, satellites, guided missiles, and eventually the smart weapons that define modern conflict. By January 25, 1945, the Battle of the Bulge was over. Germany had spent its last reserves. The Allies had held. And buried inside that victory was a technological milestone, the first weapon in human history that could sense its environment and choose the moment it detonated. The proximity fuse wasn't just a breakthrough, it was the birth of modern precision warfare. In the frozen forests of the Ardennes, the future of warfare arrived, not with tanks or bombers, but with tiny radar brains inside artillery shells, rewriting the rules of combat forever.